welcome to a new video. My name is Irene and you are watching the Sugaridoo channel. And in this little video series I'm working on a penguin quilt for my little Mr. Jules. Today it's time to quilt the quilt. So in the last two videos I made the penguins and I paper pieced the letters of the name. And today I'm going to quilt it, and I had a sample package of batting lying around. And I just opened it, and I've never used this brand before. It's called the Warm Company. It feels super soft, so I'm going to try this out and see how it quilts. Normally I use just a normal cotton batting. This is also cotton batting, so I'm curious if I notice any difference, but normally I use one. I don't even know if there's a brand on it or not, but it's just a plain unbleached colored batting, which I use for all my quilts. I'm curious how this will do. First off, doing some basting, and then decide on the design for the quilt. So I went ahead and pressed the backing fabric, and I have some basting spray. So now I'm going to baste it. First we have a piece of backing fabric, and then my batting. Oh, maybe I'm going to give this a press as well. There we go. That helped a little bit. And by the way, I'm not sponsored or paid for any material that I use in my videos. If that would happen in the future, I would let you know. But it really feels very soft. Softer than the batting that I use normally. There we go, and then a layer of penguins. So let's spray this. I always only spray half of the quilt. And then I can just fold it back and then start patting it until it's nice and smooth. It's such a joy to baste such a mini quilt compared to doing a quilt like the tree house. Oh, that was such a big one. This is really easy peasy to baste. Perfect. So now I flip it over and then baste the backing fabric. Perfect. That looks good. Now it's all basted, I can start quilting it, but I'm not completely sure what I'm going to do with it. I would love to let the letters be unquilted, so then they pop out a little bit more. So I'm going to sew around those letters first, I think. Yeah, I'm going to sew around those letters first, and then decide on a overall quilting pattern. Yeah, and the overall quilting pattern is not going to be too dense, because then the quilt gets stiff. And I want it to be just a soft quilt that will be used and loved a lot. So yeah, I'm going to quilt it with a overall quilt pattern. I'm thinking of the design, I think that's design 18 from my ebook, and then pretty big ones, so might go with that. But I'm first going to start sewing around the letters. Always a good idea to dust out your machine and put in a full bobbin and put on a new needle before you start quilting. Not that I always do that, but I know that's a good thing, so just going to dust this out. That is just super dusty. Let's put this in. and then this one. And then I'll put in my quilting table. All set. So here we have the quilt. I'm setting my stitch length a bit bigger because I like that for quilting. Just like how that looks. I'm going to set it on 4. So let's start quilting. Oh, that looks nice. It's going to look really nice on the back of the quilt. And also on the front, I really like it. So I'm going to make myself a cup of tea and quilt the other letters. The thing I do when I start quilting is that I pick my thread and do my needle down and my needle up, and then when I pull on this thread, then I pull up my bobbin thread. So I'll just leave it here so they have a pretty good length. That makes it easier for me to bury the thread when I'm done quilting, so to finish off the thread. And then I'll just do a few stitches on the same spot, and then I can start quilting. And what I'm using at the moment is a thing to lift my presser foot, so I can leave 2 hands on the quilt. With my leg I can lift the foot, so I can pivot around my needle. So I'm sewing with my needle down always while I'm quilting in this quilt, so it always ends in the needle down position, and then I can use my leg and I'll lift my presser foot and then turn my quilt. Otherwise I would have to lift it with my hand and then pivot it and then lower it. And I'm not always using this lifting bar, or I'm not sure what it's called, but I'm not always using it. So let me show you what I mean. How I like to be sewing is sitting right in front of my needle, so that I look straight on my needle. So when I would do that, I would have my pedal over here and would just be sewing over here. But the thing to lift the presser foot is over here. So when I would now want to lift my presser foot, I would have to turn my knee out, but this is not lifting it yet. So this is lifting it. So as you can see, I have to lift my foot off the pedal to rotate this bar. Yeah, that's just not working. So what I would do when I want to use this bar, then I just scoop over to the right, move my pedal to the right, and then I can lift it easily. But then I'm sitting over here, so then you're looking diagonally on your needle. So yeah, this is a really handy feature, but for me it's not really positioned well, and I don't even have such short legs, so that's why you often see me lifting my presser foot by hand when I'm pivoting. And this is fine to do it on such a small quilt, but when I would have a bigger quilt and would want to go around letters like this, it's not so easy to turn your work all the time. So then I would maybe try to do free motion quilting and yeah, use that free motion quilting food to go around such shapes. But I haven't done a lot with free motion quilting. I would love to practice on it and get better, because it's a lot of fun to do. In my first few quilts I did try out free motion quilting, and I even did that on my old machine, so that was pretty hard to do because the speed regulation wasn't as good, but it was a lot of fun, so maybe I should try it out. Because on this machine I guess it would already be easier than on my previous machine. And at the end, normally I would just pull up my needle and take out a thread and then bring up my bobbin thread again. But for now I'm having so many threads to bury, I'm just going to do a few stitches on the same spot and then cut the thread with my machine, which leaves me with no thread on the front. And then on the back I've got these two little thingies which I will just clip off. Yeah, so there we have all the letters quilted. So that's all the letters quilted. So now I get to start on the rest of the quilt. I just can't decide on what I want to quilt. There's so many options. And I know that all the options will be fine. But I just want to pick the option that is the most fun. I wanted to go with diagonal lines. So then going from this corner to this corner. But that feels like crossing out all the penguins. So I'm not sure I'm going to do that. The other option I wanted to do was just quilt big squares. So yeah, just like the letters. This pattern. What is it called? Yeah, just big squares. And then big enough. So the size that I want to go then would maybe be also half a penguin, which again means going right through the middle of the penguin. Ooh, and another option that would be nice would be just a wiggly zigzag line going from one side to the other. That's fun. That feels a bit like the lines on which the penguins are kind of dancing. So maybe I should do that. So what I was thinking about was doing those kind of wiggly zigzag lines, and then one with the center line over here and then one with the center line in the middle, something like that. There it is, my first quilted zigzaggy line. I think that's going to look just perfect on this quilt, so I'm going to go with this, and let's speed it up and show you how it's going to look. So the quilting is done, and there's a lot of space between the quilted lines, and that will keep the quilt nice and soft, because when you quilt lines close together, then the quilt gets stiffer and stiffer the closer the lines are together. So next steps are to square up the quilts, so trim off the excess fabric around the edges, and put a binding on it and embroider all the penguin eyes. And this is how it looks like on the front, but I used just a white cotton thread, so you don't really see the lines. But when I zoom in, of course you will see the stitches. Nice and wonky, really like it. I brought my quilt and some thread and a needle back home, so I can finish the quilt at home. I still need to sew on some eyes, and hand stitch binding. I already squared up the quilt in the studio and machine sewn the binding to the quilt. So now all I have to do is some hand stitches. And I wanted to show you how I do the eyes of the penguins. So here you see already some of them having eyes stitched on. And I make the eyes by first putting on a marking, and for that I use this one. It's a water erasable pen and I really like it. I only use it for smaller details like this on my quilt. I never tested how it will erase when I would use it in bigger scale on, for example, white fabric. I haven't tested yet, but I did test it by water erasing it with a damp cloth on my quilts for details, and that works perfectly. So I just draw on some eyes on each penguin and then I stitch it with some small stitches, and I just use a what is this? This is a Gutermann thread, polyester thread. I use it a double to get it a little bit thicker. So I guess a nice thick Orifil thread would be wonderful for this, but I don't have that in black. So I'm just taking a pretty long thread and then threading my needle. There we go. I will make a very simple knot in the end of the thread. There we go. Very simple one. And what I do then, I hope I will be able to show it to you. Yes, I guess that's in focus. So then what I would do is, here's the eye. So I would go in the fabric a little bit under where I need to start, and then I come up at the first point of where I want to start stitching. There we go. So then there's the knot, and I'll just pull it. So now the knot went in over here, and then now the knot is behind here. So that's keeping the thread. And then I can just clip off this end. And then I'll just use some back stitches. Are they called back stitches? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, this is a little bit annoying because I'm using a double thread. So I think using a thicker thread would be way easier, but it will still work. See, that's my first stitch. And I will make a second one. So there we have two little eyelashes. And then I'll just follow the markings to sew all around the eye. First stitch, and then it's really the best camera work ever. I'm sorry for that. So, and then one eye is done, and I'll just stitch underneath the fabric to the other eye. And when I'm stitching on such details, I don't let my thread come out at the other end of the quilt. So the thread will just be in between all the layers. So here we have the first eye, and then I'll move on to the second. Oh, and there we are again at the end of the eye. So I'm going to make 2 eyelashes again. 1, 2. So this would be now my last stitch for these eyes. So I'm going to make a very small knot. Making a knot. And then I'll try to get that knot as close as possible to the end of my stitch. So I haven't made my final stitch yet, but here I have my little knot. And then I'll just make my stitch and pull that knot under the fabric. So that will make sure that the stitch won't come loose again. So now I'll just, oops, you didn't see that, but so there is the knot, and then I'll just pull it and that brings the knot into the fabric, and that will secure the final stitch. So there we have 2 eyes on the penguin. So that is how I sew on details on the quilts. And quilts do get confiscated when I take them home. So I'm going to put on some Great British Bake Off and sew on all the remaining eyes for the penguins, and also finish the binding. I put on a nice scrappy binding, and I'm going to show you tomorrow morning when it's finished, and then I can also show you if Jules likes his quilt. Jules, kijk eens. Ik heb het voor jou gemaakt. Wat is dat? Even kijken. Wat zit erin? Hij is dicht? Ja. Open. Goed zo. Dat is mooi. Dat is mooi. Vind je mooi? Kijk, die is van Jules. Staat er ook Jules. Is van jou? En deze staan geen auto's op. Het zijn pinguïns. Pinguïn, pinguïn, pinguïn. Pinguïn, pinguïn. Goed zo. Mooi hè? Ja, nog één. En nog een pinguïn. En nog een pinguïn. Ja, nog één. Mooi. Die is voor jou. Alsjeblieft. Mooi hè? Ja, allemaal pinguïns. Daar is de pinguïn. 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 Blauwe pinguïn. Oranje. Rood. En de Jules. Groene. Auto. Er zijn geen auto's op. Pinguïn. Pinguïn. Kun je dat wel zeggen? Pinguïn. 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 Ja. Pinguïn. Als je nou, daar is die. Papa. Papa. Papa.
Chill out.